Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, July 8th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, billionaire Jeffrey Epstein indicted for sex trafficking as many elites hold their collective breaths. Meanwhile, Department of Justice changes lawyers in the census case as career attorneys balk. Speaking of attorneys, a grand jury investigating Trump buddy and GOP fundraiser Elliot Brody. Iran passes the nuclear threshold. Cuomo signs a bill to release Trump's taxes to Congress. UN human rights chief appalled by the U.S. treatment of migrants. Justin Amash appalled at the GOP. Bolts the party. Still nuts on most things. And Customs and Border Protection, turns out, knew about that Facebook group almost since the day it was launched. In Brazil, Glenn Greenwald targeted by Bolsonaro. Nancy Pelosi finally does something. Sadly, it's to attack the source of energy in the Democratic Party. In the Queens DA race, sort of a surrogate to relive the AOC fight against Crowley, Katz pulls ahead of Caban because of dubious ballot affidavit disqualifications. Joe Crowley still has friends in Queens, folks. Meanwhile, Joe Biden sort of apologizes for praising segregationists. Tom Steyer is jumping into the race because why not? And lastly, Amazon workers in Minnesota plan a Prime Day strike. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're all back here after an extended break. Jamie, however, apparently has run into problems leaving the border of the communist camp that she is in. We're not unclear where it is, but she went to commie camp, and the indoctrination, I guess, has not ended. She is continuing. She'll be back, I think, by Wednesday or Thursday. Hope that you had a good weekend and a good holiday. Of course, we were not here on Friday, though I would encourage you, and it will be relevant to the conversation we have about Nancy Pelosi today, to check out Alex Perrine. He had some very good points on this front, and we will get there in just a moment. I want to remind you of a couple of things. One, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, we give you an ad-free version of the show, and we give you an extended version. Twice the amount of content. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. It's your support that makes this show possible. Of course, JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. And as we noted in the pre-roll of today's podcast, or we are launching a new show. It's just going to be very quick, not even maybe 5 minutes a day, maybe. But it's going to give you the top headlines, a little bit of depth, tiny bit of depth, barely any depth, of a couple of top stories, but a couple of headlines every morning. So we're ultimately aiming, I think, for about 8:30 in the morning to get it out the door. But it may start a little bit later than that. And you will hear a new voice that you have not heard on this show. And I think you'll enjoy her voice, but more on that in the coming days. She will be, we're going to trade off the sort of the main responsibilities for the show, depending on whether I'm with my kids or not. That's basically the way we're doing it. We're going to do that. So check that out. Enjoy it. It will be in the Majority Report feed for at least several weeks. And we will give you an update of when we move it to its own feed. But you won't have to do anything other than listen to it. And it'll pop up on your feed, whether it's a members or the public feed, as the AM Quickie. That's what we've decided to call it. Subject to change, of course.
Hi.
But there it is.
It's AM Quickie time.
There you go. That will pop up
Do you
in
see?
your feed. So let's just start with, obviously Donald Trump had his 4th of July celebration, and God spoke and poured rain on everybody. There was no flooding, although one could have anticipated that.
The tank's okay?
The tank, I guess the tanks were okay. I didn't. I'll be honest with you. I didn't watch it. I didn't pay much attention to it at all. Obviously, Donald Trump screwed up in his speech. We may get to that. But also, what he did and what happened this week is that the American women's soccer team won the World Cup. Who they beat in that? It was
The Netherlands.
the Netherlands. And this has been a source of some controversy because the team, I don't know, is she the team captain? Yeah. Rapinoe, is she the team captain? And she's been pretty vocal about having no interest in going to the White House and critiquing Trump. And Donald Trump apparently a couple of days ago said, you know, do your job and win. Maybe you shouldn't talk so much. And so they won, and then they continued talking. And soccer has been one of those sports around the world that has been very much associated with politics. Maybe because it's an international sport, I'm not sure. We don't infuse politics with as many things in this country, although sports are certainly becoming far more political. And I think it was stories of maybe people who had a fandom in the Spanish Civil War for soccer teams. I think it was. Or maybe the fascists later. I can't quite remember the story that inspired me to put a black mark through my Patriots hats. And since they did not go to the White House, I was able to take those pieces of tape off. And but here is a guy from Fox News going down. I guess this must have been on Sunday, thinking he was going to cover. Oh, no, he's in France, right? With a bunch of probably expat Americans. Maybe not. Watching the final game of the World Cup. as the U.S. women's team wins, I guess, their record fourth title. I didn't realize that. And Fox gets a real sort of man or woman on the street perspective on how Trump is doing in Europe.
Has just been made, Arthel. We are here in a sports bar in Lyon, France. Here, listen to it. That we are in a sports bar. We were going to be outside. We were going to be looking at a screen with the football team there.
That's the classic soccer chant of F Trump, I think is what they're saying.
You can really see how sports fans hate it when you politicize their sports.
Right. They really hate it. I think they were also yelling Fox sucks. I think there's half of them were going Fox sucks and the other one were going F Trump.
That's versatile.
Those dovetail really nicely.
Yeah, it is a pretty
synchronized
amazing
message.
So there it is.
Wow. Do you feel the hate?
And that's why
The
soccer
hate.
will never be big in this country. Never be big. Let's get into this briefly. I mean, at this point, to the extent that this is a political story, it has to do with a billionaire. And we know that billionaires are a policy failure, definitionally. And while it doesn't have necessarily sort of the broad implications, there's certainly a microcosm. I mean, this is a guy who has been above the law. And in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, or I guess convicted of prostitution, right?
I thought it was a plea bargain. He took a plea deal.
He pled guilty to 2 state prostitution charges, and he served 13 months in prison. He was supposedly facing federal charges. And this is because of him paying women who were underage, girls. He had to register as a sex offender. He paid restitution to the victims. But he escaped federal prosecution because he had made a deal with the U.S. attorney down there, a guy named Alexander Acosta.
Sounds familiar.
He sounds familiar because he's now the Secretary of Labor, is that right? In the Trump administration. And in sometime, I guess at the beginning of the year, maybe the end of last year, the Miami Herald did an investigation of how that case was being handled by Acosta. And essentially it found out that the victims were not made aware of this plea deal, which is the obligation of the prosecutor to do. You need the victims to sign off on a plea deal. The Herald investigation basically characterized Epstein as getting the deal of a lifetime from Acosta. There were 36 underage victims, according to this federal investigation. The agreement short-circuited the FBI probe. It also granted immunity to any co-conspirators in the case so that nobody could come back and testify against him. In February of this year, a federal judge in Florida ruled that Acosta, by not informing these victims of this plea deal, broke the law. I don't know what the implications of that. Well, I guess based upon that report, U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York started looking into this. Because at one point, I imagine Epstein and his offenses touched New York. And as of today, they indicted him on, and we're still getting sort of the details. But he was indicted for sex trafficking. Essentially, he would engage in a predatory pattern in which he would bring underage girls into a room to so-called perform massages in Epstein's New York mansion. The girls were instructed by him, or apparently as like surrogates, like old girlfriends and friends or something like that, who would tell the girls to perform, do this in the, naked, and to engage in sex acts. The indictment also implicates some of Epstein's employees. Apparently, some of these employees would make sure that if he's going from Florida to New York, that he would have, a bevy of minors available to him. I mean, this is pretty sick stuff. And he's been able to get away with this for maybe decades because of people like Acosta and for people like apparently there was a GQ piece in which these rumors were going to be talked about, and Graydon Carter struck them from the piece, I think in the late 90s. An editor can make that determination based upon, how much evidence you have. It's a difficult charge if you don't have enough evidence. I don't have a sense of how much evidence was there, but certainly the writer thought she had enough. She does not blame Graydon Carter, but someone like this is untouchable because who they surround themselves with in terms of friends. Alan Dershowitz is one of the people who's being accused by some of these victims. There's some reason to believe that Donald Trump maybe has been accused by these victims. You'll recall that there was a lawsuit against him brought in California that was thrown out because it was filed improperly, but there was some rumor before the election that this then 13-year-old girl was going to bring it. We'll see. Epstein had a relationship with the Clintons as well. He loaned them use of his plane. I suspect if Acosta was aware of any implications regarding the Clintons, we might already have found that out at one point. But who knows? But it just goes to show you what he's able to get away with here and has been able to get away with for so long. But for a reporter at the Miami Herald, essentially, really digging into this in an era, right, where there's a increased sensitivity to the idea of powerful men getting away with stuff. But for that, this guy would have gotten away with some of the most heinous things that you can do in our society because he's a billionaire. You don't brush up against a U.S. attorney with these kind of charges and get away with it for any other casual reasons. It's because the power that comes with a billionaire. So you could imagine what billionaires can get away with in this country that don't involve what society considers literally to be the worst thing that you can do. Child rape. Multiple child rape. Like an operation to commit child rape. So it just gives you a sense of the problems with this type of with the problem with this type of consolidated power and money. So we'll see what happens with this guy. There's a lot of people I think are pretty upset. You know, my understanding is that Dershowitz wrote a letter to the Pulitzer Committee saying, listing all these reasons why that that Miami Herald piece should not get the Pulitzer because it had been nominated. There was a 2002 quote from Trump that Epstein likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Direct quote. I never met him. Don't know who he is.
Right. And I mean, I think it's also worth, the flight logs of Epstein's plane. And this is, making distinctions that, as you pointed out with Dershowitz and Trump, it's there's a higher level of scrutiny, but there's no implication that Larry Summers or Steven Pinker or anybody like that are involved in this sort of thing. But these are all people, also like Naomi Campbell, who've been on this guy's plane. And it's just also this new Daily Beast piece about all of the money that he's given to various organizations at Harvard, various nonprofits. It's just really important to dig into how somebody can just insulate themselves. Even as you say, I mean, this is not like, oh, he's a billionaire. He gets away with, I don't know, drunk driving, right? Like this is, as you say, nothing worse. And he's insulated deeply into a lot of parts of society.
Yeah, I mean, and it's indicative of a larger problem, right? But this is basically how, if you were doing the metaphor in the theater production, this is what you would do. This is the way you would express this much larger societal problem without having to tackle all of those things.
I would read this Gawker piece from 2015. Flight logs put Clinton Dershowitz on pedophile billionaire's sex jet, which is that's a Gawker headline, but it gets into the detail of these flight logs, and I think it's worth knowing about.
So we will be following that, obviously, to the extent that it has implications on society. Like, broadly speaking, I don't like to follow criminal trials. I just... I mean, maybe personally, but not in terms of news. I mean, that stuff, I just have never, I don't know why I'm allergic to that, but I don't find it that...
Because you shouldn't, I mean, at least in my opinion, you shouldn't necessarily have in the dog in the fight of a conviction, frankly, as a journalist or a commentator.
Yeah, I think that's basically
feel
it.
that way.
And it's sort of what's going to happen with the court is going to happen, and there's not a lot of politics involved in that. The politics that are going to be involved in it are really on how he got to this point, and who gets implicated beyond it. And that's basically it. We need to talk about what's going on at the border. And this has been, this has been since day one of this administration. It was quite clear that immigrants and would-be immigrants, and specifically from Central America in particular, but also, places like the Caribbean and Africa and Syria, I guess, refugees, were going to be the ones who pay the price the most for the Trump administration. But this is the way that all oppressive regimes start. They go towards the weakest members of society, the ones who have the least political power. The gypsies, the Jews, the homosexuals. I mean, that's sort of like the way that these things go. The immigrant. And so, in many respects, they're the canaries in the the coal mine, but really they're also just like they're the people in the coal mine too. The UN human rights, what do they call it? I want to say raconteur, but I'm not 100% sure what they appellate
Repertoire.
The Bachelet, what is it? No, Bachelet.
Wait,
is
Michelle Bachelet is
right.
her name.
It is the Michelle Bachelet. She's the human rights chief, I guess they call it. They used to have a different name for her. Is appalled, according to her office Monday, at the notion, as she says, as a pediatrician, but also as a mother and a former head of state, I'm deeply shocked that children are forced to sleep on the floor in overcrowded facilities without access to adequate health care or food, with poor sanitation conditions. In a statement released by the UN. New York Times on Saturday had an extended look at the migrant detention center, so-called migrant detention center in Clint, Texas. Apparently, after interviewing dozens of people, the men and women who work there were grappling with the stuff of nightmares. Outbreaks of scabies, shingles, and chickenpox were spreading among the hundreds of children who were being held in cramped cells, agents said. The stench of the children's dirty clothing was so strong it spread to the agents' own clothing. People in town would scrunch their noses when they left work. The children cried constantly. One girl seemed likely enough to try to kill herself that the agents made her sleep on a cot in front of them so they could watch her as they were processing new arrivals. Some Border Patrol agents spoke about how dehumanizing it was. They mentioned that the Border Patrol leaders, including Aaron Hull, the outspoken chief patrol agent of the agency's El Paso sector, have disputed descriptions of degrading conditions inside Clint and other migrant detention sites around El Paso. But a review of the operations of the Clint station near El Paso's eastern edge show that the agency's leadership knew for months that some children had no beds to sleep on, no way to clean themselves, and sometimes went hungry. Its own agents had raised the alarm and found themselves having to accommodate even more arrivals. The piece goes on from there. There's some very heartbreaking stories of individual kids and their parents. You should check it out. It's disgusting. And I don't know that it's really, frankly, anything other than the plan that the Trump administration has. Here is Donald Trump claiming he's seen these places and they're great.
But here's the thing. When people come in illegally and then it's crowded, and I've seen some of those places and they are run beautifully. They're clean, they're good, they do a great job. They do a great job. They're crowded because the Democrats will not give us any relief from these loopholes. We have loopholes that are so bad. We have asylum that's so bad. So these places are, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, they're incredible. They're really well run. I'll tell you what, and I said it yesterday, Border Patrol did not train to be doctors and nurses and janitors. That's not what they trained to be. They trained to be Border Patrol. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing a phenomenal job. Because of the country, because we're doing so well as a country, we've never done this well.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, we don't need to hear more. So this is where we're at. Bad enough should be for people to abandon the Republican Party, but it won't be. It won't be. That's just, I mean, meanwhile, the FBI and ICE apparently are using states' driver's license databases and going through using facial recognition software without any knowledge or consent, obviously, of people.
Thank you, Silicon Valley, for that.
Yeah.
It could be Palantir specifically, but regardless, I mean.
It's unclear what they're looking for in those things. I guess maybe they just scan through to try and find out individuals. I've heard stuff about the DEA doing this stuff too a while back. I'm not sure what ICE has to do with it, but there you go. And then lastly, you'll recall the other day we talked about the story that ProPublica broke about a Facebook group where former Customs and Border Protection officers, current ones, some supervisors anyways, they haven't been able to identify all of them, but 9,500 people who refer to themselves as all being part of the family, 20,000 Customs and Border Protection officers in the country, and all sorts of horrific things being put up there. Acts of violence towards immigrants, depictions of AOC, basically being sexually assaulted by the president, claims of threats to assault Ocasio-Cortez, complete disregard for the life of the immigrants who have died. I mean, just a horrific, talk about a red flag. Exhibit A and why this organization is so putrid. But with that said, could be a few bad apples, right? You can't blame the organization for a few bad apples that are just joining these groups. It's not like the organization knew about it and condoned it, although it's exactly like that. Yeah, exactly. Customs and, I think this is from the Washington Post. Politico, excuse me. Customs and Border Protection officials have been aware for up to 3 years that a secret Facebook group for current and former Border Patrol agents was posting offensive messages far longer than previously reported. We should tell you that the group was established 3 years ago. Border Patrol leadership knew about photos posted to the group as far back as 2016 when agents reported them. It's according to a current Homeland Security official. The images, several of which were provided to Politico, show agents engaging in conduct that includes simulating sex acts and taking selfies while defecating. Former DHS official said he was aware of the Facebook group during the past year. Neither official knew of any serious punishment ever leveled at members of the Facebook group. That's called condoning it, folks. That's called condoning it. Top Homeland Security Department officials, including DHS Secretary Kevin McClean and Border Patrol Chief Carla Provost, denounced these posts this week and pledged to hold any culpable agents accountable. This is an organization that you got to start over. You don't build it in this fashion, but this. Remember, this is an outfit basically that has been weaponized and militarized only for 17 years.
2002. Right after September 11th. It's weaponized from the beginning. It's focused on war on terrorism.
But the point is like 17 years later, this thing was corrosive from the beginning. it is now woven into the fabric of this agency. You got to get rid of it. Total house cleaning. Total. Bring it back, and hopefully, in the context of what we heard from the presidential candidates the other day, bring it back as an agency that's dedicated towards assuring the safety of Americans rather than the policing of potential immigrants. So it's one thing to say, like, yeah, let me see your passport. It's another to round people up and put them in steel hangars, essentially. Lastly, an update on a story that Ronald Reagan told us, I don't know, a couple months ago. That was he saying that one of his clients was involved? I can't remember, but I think so. Former ICE chief counsel. This is an attorney and a officer of the court, as they call him, gets 4 years in prison for stealing immigrants' identities. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that as we talk about like all the dangers that come from immigrants.
They tempt people into crime.
Exactly.
He was an officer of the court, and then he got tempted into crime. I mean, it's a really great tragedy.
Well, it's like you think about, Trump can't hire lawyers that don't seem just on the face of them corrupt. But it's not just a Trump problem. ICE's chief counsel was stealing immigrants' identities.
I mean,
That's
ICE is a
insane.
structurally unacceptable organization.
There
And
must
I'm
be
not
something
somebody
just
who
so
says,
horrific about the mission of this agency that it is like, this is the type of people who are joining it.
And it doesn't need to exist. Like when we talk about policing like police, right? One of the reasons I don't go for those sort of like, yeah, man, just like get rid of the cop stuff is because like, look, anything short of a complete utopia, and in fact, actually almost certainly in a utopia, you're going to need something that functionally corresponds to police. The question is radically changing the police. But this is an organization that does not need to exist. There is nothing, even with a border, and as you said, it checks people's passports, it does whatever. We still have a border. There's nothing structurally necessary about this thing existing, period.
But I mean, how would you steal immigrants' identities?
Right. Well, I'm actually, for
You're
what
leaving
it's
money on the
worth, in
table.
fact, you could, I'm sure just by checking people's passports and stuff, you could get relevant info.
Right, that's true.
I think you could still do ID theft, just not child toilet drinking.
Right, just a photocopy machine.
I'll throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Don't forget that's one of the early episodes of Narcos when they fly to Colombia. They didn't get detained. They just took photocopies of the passport and sent it to the cartel.
There you go.
And I think if Colombia could figure that out in the late 80s, the United States in 2019 can as well.
All right, lastly, let's end the first half of the show with a clip of Donald Trump in his July 4th.
Oh, really quick, I'm sorry. Did you get the IM?
Oh, yes.
Big news in the presidential race.
Swalwell. All's well that ends Swalwell. I guess. Swalwell dropping
He
out.
took his one moment in the national spotlight to make diaper jokes and make Joe Biden seem sympathetic by constantly telling him that he was going to die soon.
Respect to Swalwell.
Yeah.
It's better than Hickenlooper.
No, Hickenlooper is still there. Hickenlooper is totally the guy in the movie that seems kind of sedate and bland, but you're like, oh, that guy's a psycho. Like everybody's gonna drop out. Everybody's gonna quit his campaign. He's gonna be like, I don't care. I'll fly around drinking frack water and ranting about socialism. That guy's deranged.
Guys who don't necessarily have a future in politics are the ones that they're just gonna.
He could run for Senate, no problem. This is self-created oblivion.
All right, so Donald Trump was out giving a speech on July 4th. People were annoyed that The Parks Department had to spend millions of dollars to accommodate tanks on trailers, I guess, or I don't know.
Platforms.
So ridiculous and stupid. And apparently people got soaked there and didn't enjoy themselves, which is great. And here's Donald Trump. I mean, again, this is one of those situations where if you were living in a repressive regime and you were a cameraman, you would be like, how can I send a message without being held to it, right? Like, this is why like satire exists. And here it is, an image of Donald Trump with like on a rain-streaked plexiglass. I guess I don't know if they claimed, I don't even know how they described this, if they claimed that there was a malfunction with the teleprompter. But here's Donald Trump talking about the Revolutionary War and making some pretty bad
anachronisms.
Yeah, I guess so.
It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do.
Wait, go back earlier. You need to lead into that a little bit more. Yeah, go back a little bit earlier. Okay.
It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory. And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiant.
Just to remind you, he's talking about the Revolutionary War. Now, one of the major military failures of George Washington was to expend so much resources in building airports at a time when we did not have airplanes. There was a very controversial choice, but...
Well, that was one of the earliest
yeah,
splits
Benedict
in
Arnold's
our
like,
politics. That Jefferson was fiercely opposed to airport
Benedict Arnold was like, it's like, build it.
We're going to future-proof our...
Wait, it turns out instead of being a traitor, Benedict Arnold was just an early Silicon Valley guy. So I'm just future envisioning.
In June of 1775, the Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York, and named after the great George Washington, Commander-in-Chief. The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory
named
across...
it after George Washington? Or they named George Washington the...
George Washington's middle name was Army.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
the waters of the Delaware and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our army manned the airports. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do.
Wait, go back. What did he swallowed something? Like, it's possible that there was a malfunction in the teleprompter, which makes this even worse because it means like he literally had no idea what words were coming out of his mouth. Like, he didn't even know what century he was talking about. Go back just a little bit more. I mean, just a little bit. Just, yeah, right there.
Seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our army manned the airports. It ran
the what? The airports?
It took the airports. Yorktown. Our army manned the airports. It ran the ramparts.
The airports?
It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory. And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiant. At Shiloh, Antietam, and Gettysburg, our soldiers gave the last full measure of devotion for the true unity of our nation and the freedom of all Americans.
Oh, he's definitely got the Adderall
in the
thing going or
trenches of
whatever it
World
is that he
War
does.
I, an Army sergeant named Alvin York faced an inferno of be fire and refused to retreat. He said, I won't leave, and refused to them be fire and refused to retreat. He said, I won't leave, I won't stop. He shot his rifle 18 times, killing 18 of the enemy. When they fixed bayonets and charged, he killed 7 more. The entire German machine gun battalion surrendered because of one man, Alvin York. A generation later, the army returned to Europe and embarked upon a great crusade. With knives and rifles in hand, the Rangers scaled the cliffs of Normandy. The 101st Airborne leapt into the danger from above, illuminated only by enemy flares, explosions, and burning aircraft. They threw back the Nazi Empire with lightning of their own from the turrets of Sherman tanks.
He doesn't know
and
anything
the
that
barrels.
he's reading here. I mean, he as far as he's concerned, he could still be in the 18th century.
Where's the MacArthur part?
Yeah.
And then MacArthur came and he told the British, we like the Queen very much. And
All
we're
right.
going to have our own country now. Did you see that meme I sent you?
No.
It's worth putting up just for the full immaturity of it. Why not? I have no problem with this.
How many was it? It was 1 by land, 2 by sea, and 3 by air? Was it?
Exactly. 3 by air. It's a British Airways Boeing jet.
It just goes to show you.
Shuhana Hussein.
It just goes to show you that you can overcome these things, even if you're completely outgunned in technology.
I mean, could you imagine? We were such brutal, ruthless guerrillas that we actually defeated the British when they had a fully equipped air force.
We should get the point about how unimportant air superiority is after a Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, join themajorityreport.com. Your support makes this show possible. We in the fun half today, we're going to be talking about a lot about what's going on basically in the 2020 race. A lot of polls. They're all over the place to a certain extent. Oh, we didn't even get to Pelosi stuff, which we're going to talk about. I mean, and just, briefly, I'll just say this before we get into the fun half. There's just 2 aspects of this that sort of mitigate my critique of Pelosi. One is the real possibility that Chuck Schumer is such a disaster that Pelosi really can't do much about it. But if that is the case, which I think could very well be the case, and these things aren't mutually exclusive, there's also no reason for Pelosi to be doing what she's doing. There's a quality to this of like, welcome to the dollhouse. Kid gets picked on at school and then goes home and kicks the dog type of situation. And the other aspect of this is in terms of, and I tweeted this on yesterday, is that copping to being supportive of her as the majority leader, ultimately the Speaker of the House, because of the absence of any other legit candidates. Now, Seth Moulton, but Tim Ryan, here's this. It is hard to imagine a worse situation than we have now. Like, I don't see any plan. Doesn't matter what her skill set is if they're not doing anything. If Nancy Pelosi's not going to do anything, if she's not going to impeach, or if she's afraid to impeach because of Chuck Schumer, because he won't deliver anybody, if she can't get a bill that provides money to Customs and Border Protection that provides also oversight, some type of reporting, some type of access for members of Congress. If she can't get that, or Chuck Schumer has made it impossible to get that, which I think is also true, right? He released everybody in the Senate. Then whether it's her failure or Chuck Schumer's failure, the bottom line is it makes having her there irrelevant. Any of the positives that you could argue came from having Pelosi in that position are irrelevant, and they are particularly irrelevant, and in fact, I would say, begin to argue for the other side, when she goes out of her way to attack the left of the party, or at the very least, the youth of the party, or the energy of the party. I mean, I don't know that AOC's positions on this stuff have been to the left. I don't know if it's a left position to say we should impeach. I don't know if it's a left position to say, hey, we need oversight for this agency that we're going to give these billions of dollars to. But it's certainly a more aggressive one. And she is afraid of that, or is whatever the problem is. But where's the value in having Nancy Pelosi there if she's not going to do anything? Then it doesn't matter how
she's
bad.
She's doing something, right? She's attacking the left.
Well, but my point is if she's attacking the left and doing some other stuff that is good, then
well, I think we
at least you can make an assessment.
Clearly, her mission, right? Like she's chosen to go to war with one force primarily.
And it certainly appears that, and I don't. This is her electoral strategy. It seems like a pretty piss poor one to me. Because between AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Tlaib, that's who you need to come out in terms of voters in 2020 if you're going to win. Young women of color. You need those people to come out in 2020 in droves if you're going to win. And I don't know if she's just lost a step or whatever it is, but it ain't working. We'll talk a little more about that in the fun half, as well as maybe we can put together a swan song for Eric Swalwell. So sorry.
You're old. Russia. You're old. You're super old.
All right. 646-257-3920. Oh, today is Monday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Michael, what's happening on Tuesday?
We have an interview with somebody calling us anonymously, I believe, from the occupied Western Sahara, which is one of the more sort of complicated political and basically the only other occupation in the world besides Israel-Palestine is Morocco occupying this piece of land in the Western Sahara. And there's a lot of movement building there that's interesting and worth talking about. So we're going to go have that conversation. Then Emma Vigeland joins us in studio. We have a whole bunch to talk about, including, of course, this viral video she did with this Cuban Trump supporter, as well as Iran. Iran has started enriching. What's the play out of that? And a whole bunch more. This past weekend, we did an illicit history of the creation of the bureaucracy of the military-industrial complex with Daniel Bessner. And also, I would say tickets are starting to move fast now as we get to the last several weeks before the Chicago live show. You can get your tickets on the majority.fm homepage, patreon.com/TMBS Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
Matt.
A Literary Hangover. There's a new nonfiction episode of Literary Hangover up on Rutger Bregman's Utopia for Realists. We've had him on this show, folks. We talk about his UBI, why Yang's UBI is trash, his open borders persuasiveness, which I think he's really good at messaging, and also how he had Steven Pinker blurb his book. and said like it's very good, and then how he bashes Steve Pinker as an optimist sort of whiner in interviews. So I like that about Rucker. So yeah, I'm a fan of Rucker Bregman, and I sort of position it as the debate between the sort of Keynesian reformists and the Marxist revolutionaries. And I think that's actually, if we had an actual battlefield of ideas that wasn't overly influenced by power and stuff, that would be where we were arguing. So I think it's an interesting book for that sort of argument, and me and my friend Chris have that.
All right, quick break. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
let's play this clip of Emma Vigeland going to the Trump rally. Was this a Trump rally in Florida, or I guess during the Democratic debates, I think, or somewhere around there? And there may have been some protesters outside. It reminds me of the time where I went to that 812, I think it was 812 or 912 Glenn Beck rally and the Washington Memorial. And maybe we got to dig into that stuff and maybe pull some of that stuff, because it's still equally as relevant. It is always a little bit sort of, I want to say uncomfortable, but difficult to sort of wrap your head around when you talk to some of these people. They have a total confidence in what they're saying. You know, it's not like when you go on the man of the street and you're like, who's the vice president? And people are like, I have no idea. Or, you know, there is, I have no idea who it is. There's a level of confidence to this ignorance that is impressive. Here is Emma Vigeland with a Trump supporter. I believe maybe this is outside the debate. She's wearing a press badge, so I have a feeling that's what it was last week. But here it is.
Do you think Joe Biden is a socialist?
Yes.
How would you define socialism?
I define socialism when you bring down your own country, your own race, because he's not black. And
what does that mean? Bringing him down to black people? Is that what you're saying?
No. He's saying that the white people, he doesn't look at himself in the mirror.
So he...
That's what I look at. Hey, you talk about the white people and look at you.
Well, he actually...
You know I don't like him? I'll tell you exactly why I don't like him. He's got a big ego. He thinks he's better than God.
You're Trump.
Before we get off the race stuff, or is she saying Joe is too like woke?
I think yes, she is. She is saying that he is being too hard on white people, and then I think she does make the very astute and I think very defensible accusation that Joe Biden is too arrogant. I think that's.
Can I just say, I just want to give credit where credit is due here. She's giving a remarkably similar. People ask me what kind of socialist I am. This woman is pretty closely tracking my definition
take down
of myself.
Your own country.
Take down my own country and race. Core mission.
He actually...
You know I don't like him? I'll tell you exactly why I don't like him. He's got a big ego. Mm-hmm. He thinks he's better than God.
You're Trump said he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it.
No, I don't think so.
He did say that.
No, he didn't. No.
It's on tape.
No, I don't believe it. No, that's fake.
I swear to God, you can watch it.
Fake news. Fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
Okay. Do you want to watch the video?
They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Any of the Democrats, do any of them appeal to you?
Liars. All liars. The Pinocchio keeps growing.
Okay.
And then you yourself won't have a country. You yourself won't have a country. Keep believing all these liars, and you yourself will be out of your country. Socialism doesn't work wherever it goes.
But why is Joe Biden a socialist?
Why is Joe Biden a socialist? Because it's all about the money. I mean...
But socialism is about...
You know, the thing is that Joe Biden is all about the money. It's all about the power, the money. That's why.
Trump's a billionaire.
Yes, and so is Joe Biden.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Trump went bankrupt 4 times.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And that's business.
But he did.
How many people? Okay, you go bankrupt. How many people don't start all over again after a bankruptcy?
The Democratic Party really needs to appeal to people like this. They're honestly like the valuable insight I guess you gain from that is just like there is a certain percentage of the population where it's just like forget about it.
Yes.
Totally forget about it. It's just not happening.
It's my people.
It's a good opportunity to reread about what Castro did after he took power.
Oh, and getting rid of...
Maybe you could read it with a little bit more sympathy. A little bit more thoughtfulness about where he was coming from.
It's tough stuff.
It was tough stuff, and it was a tough deal.
All right, we got caller calling from a 303 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Matt, calling from Longmont, Colorado.
Matt, what's on your mind?
I officially left the Republican Party in 2015 and have since become a progressive. So I still have some friends with opposing views to my own. I was talking with a right-wing conservative friend of mine about immigration and the camps the other day, and he said, those kids are in cages until they can be sent home. So I asked, when are they going to be sent home? Why have they already sent some of the parents home without them? And ultimately, if Obama was able to deport record numbers of people during his administration, then why don't we just use the exact same methods and deport these folks instead of separating families and stockpiling them in these overcrowded cells and cages? It ended up being one of those rare moments where I managed to stump this guy, but I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? If they aren't going to grant amnesty or a pathway to citizenship, then why not at least deport them immediately? Or am I just oversimplifying it?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, you're oversimplifying it insofar as like you need to process these people. You need to give them. You can't just deport them right off. And the problem is that the Trump administration put out the word that they were going to close the borders, and so people are trying to get in under the wire. It used to be the case that you would allow these families to stay together and then stay with other friends or family who would come, and they would be able to keep track of where they were. And about 80 to 95% of these people would come back for their hearings in an orderly fashion. From a logistics standpoint, I'm not 100% sure why the Trump administration couldn't do what the Obama administration does, but they don't want to, because they actually are using this as a policy to deter people from coming, and it's clearly not working. But let me ask you a question: What was it that in 2015 that made you turn from a Republican to a progressive?
The candidates. Oh, well, so I say officially because I had been, I voted for Obama twice. Before that, I voted for George W. Bush, and I always regretted that. I didn't see the light at the time. I have now. And when I was looking at those candidates in 2016 for the Republican Party, especially Donald Trump, I was appalled. And I had my doubts and frustrations with the Democratic Party, but I thought that they were still a fighting chance over there. So I switched sides. I'm technically a Democrat, but I call myself a progressive because I can't really relate to those folks 100%.
Right. Interesting. Well, I appreciate the call. I'll try and get an answer for you on that, on exactly if the Trump administration could do what Obama did, and if they don't, why.
Yeah, because otherwise it just feels like a political stunt. Like they're just doing it so that they can, like you said, deter people from coming over here, but, at what cost?
Well, I think that's what they're doing, and I don't think they care about the cost, but I appreciate the call.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, just the man I wanted to speak to.
Oh, cool.
Did you hear that last caller?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
What is it? Why is it the Trump? Why is there this problem at the border? I mean, was my assessment of it correct? Why couldn't Trump deport? I'm not saying he should. I would actually argue he should not. But why couldn't he deport at the rate that Obama did, particularly in his first term?
Well, I think that they probably tried. I'm not sure exactly why the numbers weren't quite up to snuff. Obama's numbers were really from the overuse or the expanded use of a process called expedited removal at the border, where if people are detained within a certain distance of a port of entry, they can be expeditiously removed, and that can count as a deportation. Whereas in the past, a lot of those people were returned under what's called voluntary return. So basically, they take their picture, they sign a form, and then they return them without any legal consequence. So under certain circumstances, Border Patrol can just expeditiously order somebody deported without a judge or anything. Now, if more people are requesting asylum and saying, I'm afraid to go back, then that means they can't just immediately be deported. They have to have an interview with an asylum officer. There's a whole process. But, I think what is going on now is that under the Obama administration, people were fairly aggressively paroled. They're allowed to come in, and Border Patrol would put them in removal proceedings where they would, get the chance to go before a judge and present an asylum claim. And in some cases, you would even see people who didn't express a fear. They were apprehended at the border, and Border Patrol paroled them and placed them in removal proceedings. And, I would talk to these people and they'd say, well, I just came here to work. I'm not afraid to go back, but no, I have a deportation hearing. And I think in some cases, Border Patrol was doing that as a sort of release valve because maybe they didn't have capacity for somebody, or it was the middle of the night and it was their shift was almost over. Or it was
prosecutorial discretion is basically what it comes down to.
Right, and they they were telling the officer, look, my brother lives in Yakima, and they called the brother, and the brother said, yeah, I'm here. And so rather than detain them and whatever, they would just parole them sometimes. So, but I mean, basically what's happening is, quite explicitly, I think, it's not like we're reading a lot into this, is they're trying to act as a deterrent. And the only way you can really do that when people are fleeing from abhorrent gang violence and complete chaos is to out cartel the cartels. And so you have to be, if you wake up in the morning and there's heads on your front porch, or your neighbor's house is on fire and their bodies are strung up on the overpass or whatever, you're going to flee. And the only way you'd be deterred from fleeing is if what's on the other side is even worse.
Right.
And so this is sort of the only way we're going to be successful is if the images coming out and the stories coming out are even more brutal and more disgusting and more violent than what people have to face if they stay. So, yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand complicated, on the other hand not that complicated. We could just not torture. These conditions are terrible and it's expensive. You could just put them in a Holiday Inn, or a lot of the people being detained have families that they could easily be released to. There's all kinds of alternatives to detention, including things that I'm not a fan of, like ankle monitoring and regular check-ins, and at the local ICE offices, which is what people have been doing really since 2014 or even earlier. And it's been successful. But this goes back to even earlier when Jeff Sessions issued this decision, matter of AB, where he said, well, domestic violence or gang violence is not a grounds for protection under our asylum laws. And so they started even before all of this by trying to cut off the legal mechanisms that people could use to get protection. And it's not like everyone who was a victim of a gang or domestic violence was being granted asylum anyways. It was already really hard, even if you'd been battered or whatever the circumstances. But, this is just purely about not wanting brown people here. I think one of the ironies or the tragedies, I don't know, this is like American history 101, but at the same time, we've got these people in cages. I'm in an agricultural district, and our congressman is trying to get an expansion of the guest worker program because we have a major labor shortage.
Yep.
And so we have people in cages who want to do jobs and jobs that need doing. And, these things can't connect somehow.
Somebody was telling me on the Cape, up in Massachusetts, a lot of these Cape towns, and I imagine this is probably happening in the coast of Maine. I imagine it's happening at all these sort of like summer destinations. There was a lot of Eastern Europeans who used to work there. I mean, years ago, it used to be Irish, but a lot of Eastern Europeans, and they can no longer get visas. And, you know, so on some level, that's at least slightly encouraging insofar as that they're being, they're not just reserving their ire just for brown people, but they're making it much more difficult for immigrants, you know, to come even just in seasonal work. It's pretty stunning.
Yeah. And the guy who I guess he's the acting director of USCIS, which is the sort of legal, you know, family-based or affirmative types of immigration relief. So if you're applying for your wife or whatever, you know, he's in charge of this part of immigration. And he's going on, the crazy thing is he's going on Fox News and acting as a mouthpiece for ICE and talking about deporting people and all this stuff when this is a part of the agency which has always very traditionally been about, you know, we're here to sort of help people actually get their papers. And, you know, not that they're super helpful, but the people that they put in charge of this agency are also like deportation hawks, which means if you are filing for your wife or your parent or something, and you've got all your ducks in a row, instead of having like a fairly, you know, friendly adjudicator who's there to sort of make sure everything's in order, they're now ratcheting things up and really looking for reasons to deny applications or to ask for more evidence, and everything is sort of grinding to a slow halt. So everything is terrible. I wanted to real quick talk about that Seattle case of the chief counsel guy who was stealing immigrants' identities. That story kind of starts a few years earlier when one of their trial attorneys, Jonathan Love, got convicted for forging documents in a case from 7 years earlier. And he forged this document which basically blocked somebody in removal proceedings from qualifying for relief to stay in the country. And so the guy was deported. And luckily the case was reviewed by another attorney who realized this form that was supposedly signed by the respondent, the immigrant, is an ICE form that predates ICE. Like, this form can't have existed. And it was filed in court by this trial attorney, Jonathan Love. And his boss was this chief counsel, Rafael Sanchez, who was just convicted sentenced to 4 years. And at the time, you know, advocates were saying, hey, there should really be like an audit of this guy's cases, because what are the odds that in this one case 7 years ago he forged this document? And it was a really run-of-the-mill case. It wasn't like he was trying to, not that there would ever be an excuse to forge a document, but it wasn't somebody who he felt like had gotten away with a rape or something like that. It was just a regular guy who he wanted deported. And the chief counsel, Rafael Sanchez, his boss, was like, no, everything's fine. This was a one-time thing. And then a couple years later, it comes out that Rafael Sanchez, it wasn't just like, I'm going to use a couple social security numbers of immigrants in removal proceedings. He was like fabricating IDs, using their photos off their green cards and making a fake Washington state driver's licenses, checking their credit scores. So he's going through these people in removal proceedings and trying to decide like where to exercise prosecutorial discretion, and like on the side checking their credit score to see, you know, what kind of credit card he could get in their name.
Oh my God.
And so one of my friends, a colleague, he's a big FOIA guy, and he's tried to FOIA all the communication between, you know, these two individuals or, you know, other members of that office, and he's been totally stonewalled, of course. And so there's just no accountability, and it's a rotten agency for sure.
And now, on top of all that, the Justice Department is now instructing the immigration judges that they will now be doing this from like remotely with videos and no interpreters, which that should make things run pretty smoothly, right? Do you have any questions? I don't follow your question. Thank you for coming.
Right. So there's these, preliminary hearings where you go and you sort of give them, advisories and you take applications and things like that. And apparently they want to just have like a video recording of somebody saying, you're in removal proceedings and here are your rights, but not have interpreters there so that the respondent can actually communicate with the court, which is, if you're represented, if you're able to come up with the money to hire a lawyer or you're being represented pro bono, you should have a lawyer who's able to communicate with you. But a lot of people can't afford it, and so the immigration judge essentially has to act as, as an advocate in some ways of the respondent, and by informing them of things, asking them certain questions, making sure they've, screened them for potential relief and that sort of thing. And when you take the interpreter out of the equation, we're just at a point, we're one step away from like, let's just not even have a court. So, it's pretty crazy. But this is it's been going on for a while, and it's good that people are paying attention, and hopefully we can start to hear some actual like proposals and solutions from these candidates who are running. So, thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the call. Let's take one more call here. Calling from a 210. Get this. Shows up twice. 210. Who's this?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you? What's going on?
Yeah, going okay. Did you see my tweet on Wednesday that mentioned your prediction about Biden would be in third place in polling by September?
I don't know if I did or not, to be honest with you.
Okay, the original tweet by Change Research had Warren leading the poll at 22%, Harris at 21%, Biden at 18%, Bernie at 17%. So my comment was just, well done, my friend.
Oh,
so I'd like to see Biden. Yeah, so I'd like to see Biden, in third in an average of polls. That would be great. So I like the fact that you were mentioning clustering more than most pundits, and the absence of Bernie becoming the clear front runner. Clustering is the next best thing. But all of front-runner campaign are acutely aware that they have to win 15% in each individual House district, and in Texas it's in each state senatorial district, to get delegates in that district. In Iowa, 70% of all of the delegates are chosen that way, with the other 30% chosen by state totals. I agree with Michael's analysis after my call when he emphasized it's still super early and it's important to focus on the issues, and Bernie campaign has the most committed grassroots organizers in the race, and that's a definite advantage for him. So one of the producers clipped the call, and he put it up on Saturday, and has 48,000 hits. And you've commented to me before about ignoring YouTube comments, but I'm truly amazed at all of the completely uninformed Bernie supporters who haven't done any research and give opinions that aren't fact-based at all. And so, as regular listeners know, I've been a Bernie fan for decades. I promoted him on this show more than any regular caller in 2016 and in this year. And I've encouraged support for Justice Democrats and our revolution candidates in 2016 and 18. I support candidates who are progressive, even if they only have a small chance of winning. so I'm giving an honest assessment of Bernie's campaign 7 months before Iowa. So when I brought up what Bernie needs to win more support, you started talking about how Bernie needs to talk more about how people need to make sacrifice, and I don't think that's really necessary. There are many health plans out there that garner the attention. The Jayapal Medicare for All plan, which has 115 co-sponsors in the House, Bernie's plan for Medicare for All, Medicare for America, which still lets private insurers exist, and the employer provides gold quality health care, but puts everybody in the ACA in Medicare for America, as well as every newborn child, and gives employees the option to choose. And there's a whole slew of buy-in plans, which only give the buy-in option for a few individuals, such as people between 55 and 65. One way Bernie's plan is better than Medicare for America is the actual cost of the plan. Right now, every working American pays 1.45 of their salary to Medicare, and that total will be increased to 4% with no deductibles, co-payments, and everybody will have dental, vision, and audiology care. And in Medicare for America's plan, and each individual household will pay 9.69% of their monthly income. So current Medicare beneficiaries will pay either Medicare's premium, how it's currently calculated, or MFAs, whatever is higher. Actually, whatever is lower. So if your salary is below the federal poverty levels, you receive subsidies and you don't pay a premium or a deductible. But under MFA, you still have to pay a deductible. Individuals $350, $500 for a family. Maximum out of cost pocket will be $3,500 for an individual, $5,000 for a family. Employers will pay 8% for every employee enrolled in MFA. In Bernie's plan, it'll be 7.5. In MFA, Medicare Advantage will still be in place. MFA is paid for by sunsetting the Republican tax bill, imposing a 5% surcharge on adjusted gross income tax over $500,000. It also has taxes on tobacco, alcohol, sugary drinks, and makes states pay a fee that they paid under Medicaid. If states refuse to pay that fee, they will lose their funding, which is exactly what the Supreme Court struck down in the 7-2 margin, with Kagan and Breyer supporting the conservatives. This has kept red states from implementing Medicaid expansion. So any bill that should not rely on any kind of funding from red states at all. So anyway, Bernie's plan depends more on 9 different taxes on the rich. And do you think Bernie should compare the differences between his version of Medicare for All and the other?
No.
No.
I mean, listen. I think they're in maybe in the proper context, but broadly speaking, I just don't think there are people who are supportive of Medicare for America versus Medicare for All because they've dug into the granularity or are interested in the granularity of these proposals. I just don't. I think maybe this makes sense if Bernie goes in and talks to the New York Times, op-ed team or something. I think you have to have broader themes. And I think the idea is not so much that Bernie has to, frame it in the context of sacrifice, but I think it has to be framed in the context of that FDR quote, whereas they say it'll cost nothing. And, it's just going to show up, and that's just not the case. He has just got to sell. And there was a really good piece, Isaac Chotiner, is that how you pronounce his name, in The New Yorker, interviewed Dave Wasserman, who is from the Cook. I'm sure you know who he is, John.
Yeah.
The Cook. And, his assessment, he's not terribly impressed with all the candidates on the Democratic side. I think that was more of a subjective analysis than his more sort of like math-based ones. But his data suggests that people don't care about ideology. They don't care about per se, right? They're not going to vote for a Democrat because he's too far left or she's too far left or he's too far right or she's too far right. There are other elements that activate people. Now, it's quite possible that ideology informs how you present yourself to the voters. Like, I think the ability to go to the voters and saying, like, we're going to aim for the moon. We're going to aim for the moon and we're going to try and get it because you deserve a trip to the moon, or we all need to live on the moon, or that's where the only atmosphere is on the moon. And somebody goes like, you know what? Maybe we're going to make it to a satellite that's orbiting around. Maybe we're going to try and do that. I mean, because, like somebody who can't provide a full-throated endorsement or a call for something has a problem. I mean, in some respects, that's why Joe Biden's strength is that he's not interested in providing any of this stuff.
I have a question for you.
He can speak full-throatedly about his lack of agenda because there doesn't seem to be any sort of hedging on it. Now, when he's hedging, right? When he comes out and he apologizes for embracing segregationists in the way that he does, then he starts to look weak. Even though that's something that I feel like that should be your normal position. Even though it makes him look weak, and it undercuts his sales pitch.
What kind of questions are they asking when they determine that somebody doesn't care about ideology? Like specifically, what are they saying? Did they say, do you care about an ideological candidate? Because I would assume if they said it like that, then certainly most people would say no to that phrasing.
No, I think it's just that there's no evidence that in campaigns, the ideology of the candidate.
No, I understand, but I'm asking what the evidence is.
Well, I don't think it's just polling. I think it's just like looking, creating some type of matrix as to what the ideology is.
Right, but what would be in the matrix?
I mean, I don't know.
I think we should interrogate that a little bit more. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think that people are sitting there, reading policy briefs by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't know necessarily that we can make such a kind of hard and fast distinction, particularly in some candidates' cases like Sanders and in some respects Warren, where I don't know that you could separate their type of appeal from their ideological argument. If you look at
who the second choice candidates are for like Buttigieg.
No, I understand the second choice.
That starts to give you an indication that people that are willing to go from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Although in Buttigieg's case, there's definitely people anecdotally that are under the impression that he's actually quite progressive. So that to me is a flawed example. But I'm just curious because it's something we're saying a lot, and I want to know how we're actually measuring this beyond the second choice.
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, I can give you hundreds of exit polls that say just the opposite. Let me give you one just from Iowa in 2016. Clinton and Sanders, people who considered themselves very liberal, 28% of the electorate. Sanders up by 19 points. Somewhat liberal, Clinton up by 6. Moderate, Clinton up by 23. I mean, this happens all over. This is continuous. I mean, you look at, why don't black women vote for Republicans? Why do younger voters vote for the most progressive candidates in the Bernie mold? I mean, there's just so much overwhelming evidence about this. I mean, this is kind of what I study also, and so I really disagree with that analysis, and I'm actually pretty shocked that Wasserman's saying that, and that I don't really think he's good. He does a lot of research, but I mean I disagreed with him on many occasions. Also, I think that there is a big difference between paying 4% of your salary and paying 9.7% of your salary. I mean, that is, that's, what is it, about 115% higher? I mean, that is an incredible difference, and that is a very tangible issue that Bernie can say. I think that he'll receive criticism from a lot of healthcare experts and saying, this hasn't been fleshed out enough. But I mean, because there's actually the Medicare for America is actually a bill, that's hopefully, I don't agree with this. I mean, I'm just saying, I want to state I'm for Medicare for all, but I'm just saying that we have to compare these plans, and because people haven't been doing this. This is just people are just tinkering around the edges of these plans. This is just starting, and we need to talk about this more because there are distinct differences. And the fact that Bernie puts so much emphasis on taxing the rich should also be there. And it's ridiculous. Like at the end, when I was talking about, the Supreme Court has already said that you can't take away coverage, from the state that they don't comply. So why are they even putting that in the bill? It's stupid. The Supreme Court's already ruled on it, and all these sin taxes. People don't like those either, especially on sugary drinks. I mean, it's you don't have everybody paying into it either. I mean, it's great that people have the option. Everybody has the option to get in. But I just think that Medicare for all should be talked about. Let's talk about the details, and let's explain how this is better for everybody.
I think the end of the conversation is just simply like you're going to pay more in taxes and you're going to pay nothing at the point of service. And you just keep saying that over and over again to people because, to compare it to Delaney's plan, it's just like what people have not already made their mind up who would even know what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, I see your point, but I mean, the only really two viable plans where people have the option of going into Medicare for all are the Medicare for America plan and Bernie's plan, and then the Jayapal plan, which is very similar.
The thing to get people to buy into Medicare for all, at the end of the day, is not they're looking at these percentages. It is just simply the idea of like the concept, having people understand the concept and believe that it is doable, like that it is achievable, like in the same way of like, it's like arguing to people before we ever sent anybody into space, like, going to the moon is really not that much more of a significant, reaching the moon is not that much more of a significant investment. Versus, just putting a rocket into a space station, let's say. Like, you just got to argue at the concept and get people to understand and be able to accept that what is being proposed is not that radical. And it's not like, we're growing wings. It is that it can be done. And I think for them to go into the weeds on that plan, I just don't know what voters are out there going like, I'm waiting to see the differentials in these two plans. I just don't think there's a lot of people
make it simple. Make it simple. Say you're going to pay 115% more under Medicare for all than you'll pay in Bernie's plan. That's very simple. You're going to pay much more money. Almost 10% of your salary is going to be going to paying Medicare.
I think Bernie's saying you're going to pay more for less in his proposal because it's going to lack the efficiencies that Medicare for all. I think you could say that. But I mean, that took me 4 seconds to say.
All right. All right. What about Bernie? Is the fact that he's going away from the large gatherings, the stadiums and everything, and going to a more intimate setting? Is that beneficial to his candidacy or not?
I don't know. I mean, look, the media coverage for Bernie has been pretty anemic as it is. And so I think that maybe the idea is right now for the campaign is we need people who are going to go out and like, we need an army, right? Like, I would rather have 10 supporters who are going to work 18-hour days for me than 100 who might just, sign a petition. And I think that's the theory. Right? By going into smaller, more intimate settings, you're developing a deeper connection with people. I think. I think that's the theory.
Right. No, that's a theory. But you're also, you're not getting as much publicity because you don't have these huge events. People relate to that, and he's not talking about his agenda. More because it's all, one-on-one, take a selfie of me, I think he's doing it because, he thinks that, people already knows his agenda, which more or less they do to a certain extent. But I'm not sure if that's a really good strategy.
I don't know if it is or not either. I can't make that assessment, but I will say this, that Bernie knows that he has the money to stay in the race until the end. There are only I don't know how many candidates can actually make that claim. Can reasonably look at the money they have and make that claim. Buttigieg might be able to, because I don't even know how much of a sort of a ground game the guy is establishing. I don't know how much money he's spending there.
And that could evaporate.
That money could evaporate. Yeah. Exactly.
It's all corporate money.
It's all corporate money. You're right. But there may be, here's the thing. He can hang in there because it's all gravy for him, right? Even if he's just showing up and he's there, it's all gravy for him. He was mayor 2 months ago. And
the third or fourth largest town in
Indiana. So, but for
if I was
candidates
de Blasio, I'd be pissed.
Like Warren, for candidates like Biden, Harris, Booker, Beto, the prospect of not having money is real. And so you may need to do certain things that have a certain appeal that may not help you as much down the long run, right? Like more media might be helpful for Beto right now because he desperately needs to convince his donors not to abandon ship. And, it could be as easy as like, look, you saw me on TV a bunch of times. I did. I feel like there's momentum. Here's a check. Whereas Bernie doesn't need to do that. And so they can play around with what they think is going to be most effective short term and not have to worry as much about the long term, or vice versa, rather, I should say. And so that's the only thing I would keep in mind.
Steadily build up that ground crew. I agree, especially right now, of people who are just going to go door to door.
He has the advantage of doing that, in other words. And I don't know if that's the right decision necessarily, but he doesn't have to do a show for anybody at this point because he knows that money is going to come in. They can count on they can look at what's already like in the monthly contributions, and they can get an assessment of where the money is going to come in and whatnot. So, and everybody who gave only $27 or whatever it is this time around, they know they can go back to multiple times. So that goes into the calculation. Appreciate the call, John.
All right, thank you.
Right. Look at that Wasserman thing. Here's John Delaney.
So cute. John Delaney. Adorable.
He's still in the race. Stilwell has dropped out. Delaney still in the race. Why? Oh, I don't know. He is mad. He's mad.
I believe that.
That Bernie has hijacked the good name of Medicare to provide more than Medicare for people. This is a very weird construct, but it's his way of basically trying to signal to right-wingers. Now, on one hand, you got to applaud Face the Nation for having all the candidates on. On the other hand, it's like, well, I don't know. If you're going to have this dude on, why not Marianne Phillips? I mean, what?
Marianne Phillips. I am not familiar with her.
I mean,
I would definitely say that Marianne Williamson should be given double the airtime of John Delaney. She's a much more innovative candidate.
There's your signature issue, as I know. And in the last debate, you said Medicare for all is not good policy and it's not good politics. But more than 8 of the candidates, of the 24 or 25 now, support this. Are voters just being misled by your fellow Democratic candidates?
Yeah, I think they're wrong. I mean, look at so many of the candidates, Senator Warren, so many of these people have outsourced their health care plan to Bernie Sanders, right? Because this is Bernie Sanders' plan. And it'll take private insurance away from more than half of the country, and they will reject that if we run on that. It'll also reduce quality and access in our healthcare system because Medicare doesn't reimburse sufficiently to keep.
Now, understand Medicare for all is a little bit of a misnomer. It really is Medicaid for all. And reimbursement rates may very well stay the same. Don't know under Bernie's policies, to be honest with you. We do know that there'll be a far less expense involved in administrative costs and dealing with insurance companies, broadly speaking. But also, costs need to be controlled. So is Delaney just going to wave a magic wand and get costs to be controlled? I mean, if medical providers are paid the same amount of money across the board as they are today, how do you control costs?
Quality and access in our healthcare system because Medicare doesn't reimburse sufficiently to keep all the hospitals and providers.
You were booed on the debate stage when you raised this, though.
I understand that.
So it does seem popular, at least with people who vote in primaries.
But here's the thing. Medicare for all is a great slogan. They've hijacked the good name of Medicare and applied it to a law that will cause upheaval in our healthcare system. And I was the first person to actually talk about this. Now we're seeing the debate change on this issue as people start to realize my plan, which is called Better Care, is a universal healthcare plan. Every single American gets healthcare as a basic right of citizenship for free. But I preserve options. If people want to opt out and keep their private insurance, they can. If they want to buy supplemental plans, they can. It's a much better way to create a universal healthcare system.
And non-citizens?
Non-citizens are not covered by my Medicare plan, but under my immigration reform, they will have legal status while they wait on a path to citizenship, which would allow them to then be covered. See, if you take immigration and healthcare together, you kind of see how we can start solving this.
Now, when he says that everybody gets health insurance for free under his Better Care program, but the risk pool is still going to be split up between private and public. What magic wand is he going to be able to use to make this thing work? He's lying. He's lying. It's not true. He can't do it. And this is when I say, like, Bernie Sanders has to go out there, and I don't know if I would say sacrifice is the right word, but he's got to tell the American public the truth. And the truth is, this is the only way it can work. Insurance is not outlawed in his bill, private insurance. But you need to be in Medicare. There will be a market for supplemental insurance. And it will be, even under Bernie's plan, bigger than cosmetic. You may. Unlikely that you would need it. Possible that you would want it if you have enough money to go with your fur sinks. But the fact of the matter is, you need to have a single payer to drive down costs, to eliminate the bureaucracies that are involved in just like, I mean, in my house right now, I have a file this big of like bills from my kids' doctor, pediatric doctors. And the bills like range from like $25 to $75. There's like multiple ones of them. I got to call them. I got to pay each one of them at a different location. I've got dental things. I'm waiting for the money that we spent on the dentist to come back from the insurance company. I mean, it is such a massive pain in the ass as a human being. But also from the standpoint of productivity, it's like, I can't believe I got to spend all my time on this shit. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that this is our system. It is just bizarre. There is nothing else that is even remotely as bureaucratic as this. I've gone in and I've got my driver's license. I've sold cars where I've got them registered at the DMV. I've registered to vote. I've filed deeds or whatever it is. None of that even comes remotely close to what you got to deal with the health insurance companies, private insurers. It's nuts. It's nuts. So Delaney's just out and out lying. And I if you're going to invite somebody on and you're going to ask them this question, you've done the homework. People booed you. Also do the homework on what the plan is. Right? I mean, come on. Give me a break. Ridiculous. So, as part of the July 4th celebrations in Washington, D.C., the Proud Boys and the alt-right had a some type of rally, right? Who was it? Yeah, I mean, who had the official? Who was the rally? Oh, demandfreespeech.org. Now, as you know, when the framers sat down with the Constitution, the First Amendment was the right of your ability to associate with others and to speak freely without government intervention.
At the airport or on Tinder.
It's Madison's music.
If you read into the First Amendment, Amendment 1, Section D, also apparently talks about your right to put whatever profile you want on your dating app without it in any way being encumbered. And that's what this guy at the Demand Free Speech rally wanted to inform us all that his Tinder profile rights had been abridged.
And I may have been the first person in history completely banned from Tinder because my picture of myself in my dress blues uniform was reported for being offensive and promoting violence. I got that picture taken down. So you know what I did? I replaced it with a picture of me and Ted Cruz. I got completely banned off Tinder. So I opened up a new email account before Crooked Hillary can delete it. I put up a new email account. I got a picture with Donald Trump at Trump Tower last week. That is my new profile picture. I'm waiting for these woke liberals to freaking report it. All that stuff. They don't know. I wasn't going to swipe right on them anyway, so I don't even know why they're bothering. Now,
sounds like he's from South Shore.
Right.
He sort of sounded like he was like Tom Perez at first.
Yeah.
They banned me from Tinder because of how awful I am running the DNC.
It's horrible. That
It's bullshit.
They would do that.
They're not going to swipe right on you. They're not going to swipe right on you. They don't give a shit.
So
they don't care what your leisure activities are.
Apparently, at this July 4th celebration, there were some people who I think were burning a flag. And protests on both sides. You had the Proud Boys there, and they got into a physical altercation because that's what the essence of the Proud Boys is, apparently. And they got into a physical altercation with some of these other protesters. Some of the Proud Boys were arrested. They were then released, I think. Is that what this is? Is this guy coming out of the police department?
I don't know. This is just from Fort Fisher. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So this is just around, and this Proud Boys just walking around, I guess, after that. And just to give you a sense of where the police department lays on this, somebody videotaped what is it? This is called news. What is it? News. Ford Fisher's. What is his?
He's at Ford Fisher. I'm pulling up his bio.
Yeah,
right
but
now.
what is the name? News. Is it news?
And to.
News to share.
News to share. Yep. And at N2S reports.
And here's the Proud Boys getting a fist bump from the cops. Nice.
He's going down thanking them for their service, so who knows how much they know
Right.
beyond him saying that with a MAGA hat on.
Right. I don't know.
I think, I mean, to me, though, you're right. Who knows? But we can make some pretty grounded speculation. And that, I mean, it's a conversation for another day, but I'm starting to have a lot more wariness and skepticism of some of the sort of like tactics with groups like the Proud Boys, which I actually think can be pretty easily marginalized. But the relationship with the cops and this infiltration of these ideas into law enforcement, FBI, Homeland Security, that is a major, major, major threat.
All right, so Joe Biden is out there. He was issuing an apology, I guess. Is that what what is this one?
They would probably call it a clarification.
This isn't his apology. He's asked by a woman what he plans to do about the court after Kavanaugh.
Yeah, so here is Joe Biden. Apparently, Joe Biden doesn't need any plans for anything. At least that's the idea that they have. So here's Joe Biden being asked by a voter, what's the plan to deal with the fact that Mitch McConnell had kept open a seat, basically robbed Joe Biden's supposed administration of a seat on the Supreme Court. Apparently, he wasn't aware of this. Here we go.
About the courts, and I know that other people have asked you about this too, but I'm a survivor of sexual assault, and I was at the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and to watch somebody who was morally unqualified and also unfit be elevated to a lifetime position in the courts was absolutely devastating, and I'm concerned it touches everything that you talked about today: immigration, gun rights, LGBTQIA
I'm the guy that
rights.
wrote the Constitution.
Yes, and I know that, and I know that, and I appreciate that. And
Here's the deal: if you pack the courts, it's going to come back to eat us alive.
And I don't think that that's just the only option we have. I mean, there are term limits, there's a rotating panel, there's other things that we can do, but I'm concerned that if we don't have a plan to address what's going on.
I have a plan, but I'm not going to pack the courts and/or do term limits. You need a constitutional amendment to do that to begin with, number one. Number two, no one's going to get put in the lower court or the circuit court of appeals that doesn't understand the right to privacy, doesn't understand the idea that you're going to be held accountable for your actions. That's why we're able to keep Bork off the court and others.
And I understand that, but I just want to know what the plan is.
Well, the plan is to appoint the right people. That's the plan. There's a lot of vacancies in the court still. But if we go and do the court packing thing, we're in real trouble. Okay?
All right.
So he's not even going to start with a plan to put term limits on. He's not even going to start with as a negotiating point to pack the court. I also don't think that we should pack the court, but term limits, I think, are preferable. I mean, there's other ways in which you could do that, reforming the
rotation
court.
idea.
But 2/3 of the Senate could do this in the House. And a president, I don't know if we're going to get that. But what's the backup plan? There is none. Joe Biden just wants to talk about how he wrote all this crap with his own hands. Why does he talk about the bankruptcy bill if he's that excited about it?
Or the full bill, the entire criminal justice bill of 1994.
it's unclear. I mean, I don't know if you'd need an amendment to term limit on the Supreme Court if you were to allow the justices to return to another federal court. And that is that suggestion by Matt Ford, who we had on the other day. If they rotate through, if there are term limits to the judiciary, is lifetime versus where in the federal judiciary they serve. I don't know. But it would be an interesting test. Here is Joe Biden suggesting that there's nothing to come out about his background because he was vetted as Obama's vice president. Except for things like his role in busing. Or maybe that was a plus for an African-American, the first African-American president. To have a guy who had just a little bit of smell around him of a guy who would be sympathetic to segregationists, let's say. Maybe that was a plus.
Somehow it's something to do with before 2008. As if my opponents want to believe I served from 1972 to 2008 and then took a hiatus the next 8 years. They don't want to talk much about my time as Vice President of the United States. It was the honor of my lifetime to serve with a man who I believe is a great president, a historic figure, and most important to me, a close friend. I was vetted by he and 10 serious lawyers he appointed to go back and to look at every single thing in my background, from finances to anything I had done, everything. And he selected me. I'll take his judgment about my record, my character, my ability to handle a job over anyone else's.
I bet you he would.
Get back to the brand, brother. That's exactly what he should be doing. He got some rest. He got some new talking points. They're like, you know what we're going to do, Joe, is we're going to modify praising segregationists. We're going to talk about your buddy Barack.
Still waiting on that endorsement, though, right?
Well, I mean, I think the silence is endorsement enough if he keeps letting him invoke him like this.
I would not be surprised if Obama supports Joe Biden, and that shouldn't really surprise anybody. I mean,
how could he not?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, precisely. I mean, you know, it's part of like the complexity of discussing Obama and disaggregating between just the historical importance of Obama, even his just like personal appeal as a candidate and politician, but his politics, if you're on the left, are not your politics.
But even if you put aside his politics,
well,
like how could he not support
course,
his vice presidential candidate?
Sure, and my point about the politics is that he would feel perfectly fine in doing so.
I think also,
you know,
yes.
I mean, sure. I mean, if anything, in fact, if you read some of the accounts of the Obama administration, Biden is at least stylistically on a more populist end of certain conversations.
A Square, Sam, if any immigrants die in these facilities, the Mad King will be out there using the same lie about the facilities are great. This is disgraceful. I think while we're pained by the inhumanity, need to be also concerned about the politics and how it seems the Democrats are losing this battle too, with the misleadership of Schumer Pelosi. What is your sense of the politics of this, given the stance the Democrats took on the recent appropriation bill? Some days it's hard to tune into this national nightmare and the banality of evil. Well, that's the point. If you vote for this stuff, how do you get out there and argue against it? How do you say that what Trump is doing is uniquely bad, and then go in and say, like, yeah, fine, we're going to vote for your proposals? It sends mixed messages to the electorate and nothing gets out. It just turns into this miasma of there's no difference. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. New Human, Trump's historical speech style fits well with the harsh noise wall genre, clear Merzbow influence. Parameter, the Dunning-Kruger effect in full force.
Great concept.
Secret identity politics. It was the 9/12 project. Glenn Beck wanted us to remember how we felt the day after 9/11. That's right.
It was also great. It was like not too good. Yeah. Like anywhere on like a spectrum of like terrified to totally irrational bloodlust, which I guess makes sense.
We were unified.
Yeah, who we?
Andrew K. Bailey Hutchinson. Notice how conservatives point to Obama when people complain about kids in cages, but don't really say it's a bad thing. They're going to do the same deflection with Clinton regarding Epstein. Given their fascination with painting their opposition as pedophiles, is the reason they aren't really hammering Bill's ties on that because they've got much worse against more of their team? I don't know. We'll find out. Greg from Oklahoma. I started watching Sex and the City last week. I'm now on season 2. The show is amazing. Just proves my point that the late 90s and early 2000s were the best era ever. Everyone's a prison abolitionist until one person licks some unbought ice cream in a store. I don't understand that.
A girl licked ice cream in a viral video, and apparently, like, food tampering comes with a 20-year fine.
They're trying
to throw the book at her. It's atrocious.
This is so America. The people like Wall Street executives will never go to jail. These ICE agents will never go to jail, but some viral video thing.
Oh, this is funny. Glenn Kessler missed a critique of Bernie in his fact-checking piece. Bernie claimed that many people are working 2 jobs just to survive. This ignores that suicide rates are rising among poor people, so many of the people aren't even surviving their 2 jobs. 3 more Pinocchios for Bernie.
That sounds like the perfect Kessler fact check right there.
Feels like a dinosaur. Just finished reading The Mismeasure of Man by Stephen Jay Gould. Thought it would be a good book to shout out to any younger listeners, viewers like myself, who may not have heard of it before. It's getting more relevant in this IDW-stained moment of rehashing genetic determinism in regards to intelligence. We've been talking about that, actually, in this office.
Do you want to mention that article?
Well, I was just going to say, I've been slowly working my way through the audiobook of that, and if you're a leftist with any sort of interest in science, that's a definite must-read book.
And there's a must-read in Jacobin. It's called Remeasuring Stephen Jay Gould, because there was a piece, I'll try to keep this really concise, but it's important. There was a piece in 2011 in the New York Times that basically claimed that Gould not only got things wrong, but kind of like maliciously got things wrong. And that article has been used from everybody from Quillette, that's obsessed with publishing content like this. I've seen Harris dismiss Gould as dishonest. And it turns out, in fact, that not only the latest iteration of that research has sort of reasserted Gould and questioned that article. And the author of that article, Nicholas Reid, wrote a book in 2014 called Troubled Inheritance, which was so on the spectrum of this kind of like racialized trash science that even some of the scientists that he cited were like, that's not, like, we're absolutely not taking it that far in terms of what you're claiming that we're saying in your pop science. So not only is Mismeasure a great book, there's been a politicized campaign against Stephen Jay Gould's legacy. I will say I just finished the last rewrite of the Harris chapter in my book, and I'm happy that we were able to get in through the edits some of the Stephen Jay Gould stuff. It's really important.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not wrong, the thing that they said Gould got wrong was his analysis of the way they were measuring skulls.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean,
literally,
it's just phrenology. Literally caliper stuff. Like literally goes into how guys would try to like dry pumpkin seeds so they can put them inside of a skull to measure the inside. Like,
yes.
Yeah. And this is the lineage of basically a lot of the IDW guys who say that like that book was the Mismeasure of Minds was a horrible, perversion of science. And Charles Murray is actually a scientist.
Right.
Dirty Shirty. Hey, Sam, Michael, lots of talk on how do we stop the supposed border crisis. But in your opinions, how big a factor is the drug war on the scale of not really big to really big?
I'm not sure. I mean, the drug war is obviously, I mean, if you want to, I'm not totally sure what he means by that, but I mean, there's one way of looking at this whole crisis, and in Europe too, of basically like, if we didn't back a coup against Manuel Zelaya in 2009, would we have the same scale of crisis? I do not think so.
I
was some real progress happening.
I think what he means is like, how much is the drug war driving people out of these countries and destabilizing?
You can't separate U.S. foreign policy from any of these things, or European foreign policy for that matter. And I think, like, again, there should be like nothing controversial about the idea that on one hand we should have an open, humane process for getting people in the country because we want people in the country, and also that, in fact, if you didn't turn most countries into unlivable hellholes, people would probably like generally to stay close by where they grew up.
Communist dog, comrades, whenever the CCC and the DSC call asking for money, I tell them it's a big waste of my money, keeping Nancy and Chuck as leaders. Is that wrong? No.
No.
Well done.
Not wrong at all.
Cuck Schumer, can you commission Emma, someone from your crew, to do some man on the street stuff like this? These are always great.
I have no idea why anybody would do, especially at this point, do anything other than donate to specific candidates. I have no idea why you do otherwise.
Maybe I should do man on the street stuff. Be fun, actually.
Angel.
Yeah.
I'm 35 years old. I never cared about politics until seeing the disturbing enthusiasm for Trump in 2015, then seeing Bernie Sanders as a counter to that. Bernie's integrity and brutal honesty is what finally encouraged me to vote, having something to vote for. Dems need to go in that direction. That's exactly the brutal honesty is what I think he's really got to lean into more. Carmelan, great show as usual, but ancients are bringing back that's bullshit. Yeah, I got to figure out how to. Yeah, maybe. I've actually had some conversations with that, but we'll see. Ram Kami 1, the racist cruelty of these concentration camps is important for the GOP base, but I think the bigger motivation for the oligarchs controlling the levers of power is simple greed. They're another cash cow for private prison owners. Billionaires are always looking for new ways to leech off our tax dollars. Guys like John Kelly help them out and get board seats. Indeed. Let's go to call him from an 866 area code. I'm not sure how much more time we're going to have, ladies and gentlemen, for calls. You there? 866? No, 886.
Hey, Sam, this is Chris from Taiwan.
Chris from Taiwan. What's on your mind, Chris?
Well, I think our party needs new leadership. I think we need to get rid of Nancy Pelosi for some of the reasons you discussed before. But I'm not sure how we do that. So there's a guy running against her, in the primary. Shahid Buttar is his name. He seems like a good candidate. I'm going to donate to him. I think everyone should, donate to him and support him. But let's be honest. I mean, he's almost certainly going to lose. If he cracks 40%, that would be huge, And so the only other way to get rid of her is within the caucus. But the last time she had a challenge, it was from the right.
Right.
And I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I want to just complicate this a little bit, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so
sure.
There's a way superficially, and maybe not really, but let me just go with me on this for a second. In some ways, you could say that Chuck Schumer is slightly to the left of Harry Reid, right? Harry Reid was personally opposed to abortion. He had some areas where, with the strong exception of Social Security and Medicare, although Schumer has said that he would not cut those as well, as far as I understand. And my point being is, and I don't know, I certainly don't think Seth Moulton is the answer. He's awful, and I don't know about Tim Ryan at all either.
Yeah,
but I think you got to start looking not just at, if you could put somebody in place who is technically to her right, who was into seriously taking on Trump, that would absolutely be a net improvement. So I don't think it can just be as simple as who's slightly more or less, this or that. There has to be some type of attitudinal and dispositional change. And as you saw in the Reid case, Reid is not, he's got some strong populist instincts, but he was not like a man of the left. But he was willing to change. That was the other thing that happened in Grimm's book, which is a really interesting difference. Pelosi looks at this new energy and dismisses it. And Reid looked at some of the new energy when he was in charge and recognized he had to harness it. So some of these things are just dispositional and stylistic and have to do with conflict versus where somebody is politically.
With that said, there was certainly no candidates that I found terribly appealing, but I think going forward, maybe Pelosi has made some commitment of stepping down in 2 years. I don't know, but I would say supporting folks like this freshman crop of Congress people is super important. Building the strength and the power of the left in the caucus is really the only thing you can do. And so that someone emerges from that crew and says, I'm ready to take over. And that means, help with fundraising. The ability to deliver dollars is basically the way that Steny Hoyer, is the number 2 in the Democratic leadership, because he could go around and collect favors from people. And so that's the only way that I think you can impact that decision.
I do think we should put some energy behind Shahid Buttar.
No, I think
it can't do anything but help. And for what it's worth, if you put him in range of anything where at the very least Pelosi needed to reconceptualize the idea of where a threat comes from.
Right. That would put pressure on her. At the very least, his candidacy could put pressure on her to change her, her tactics.
I mean, arguably, but we'll see. But I appreciate
they have their Twitter or whatever.
It really is unbelievable how out of touch she seems. So this happened on the Joe Rogan show, I guess, the other day. Folks, look. Apparently, Dave Rubin's going through a tough time right now. And whenever there's, look, I don't care about Dave Rubin, the person. I don't. He could be a very nice guy. He could be a very complicated guy. He could be a very simple guy. He could be a deep thinker. He could be a shallow thinker. That is wholly irrelevant to me. What is relevant is he's out there with a massive platform. He's writing a book. Apparently, it's been in the works for quite a while. He purposely or unpurposely, consciously or unconsciously, disseminates misinformation and makes what I think is a very disingenuous argument about the left, about the right, about what constitutes the center. He works for Turning Points USA. He has worked for various libertarian outfits. He is a right-wing spokesperson. He may personally, be against the death penalty and
be reluctantly pro-choice.
Although apparently that's changing.
Tough these days.
This is a really hard one.
At one point, he was simultaneously for a single-payer health insurance and shrinking the size of government. Now, that is impossible. And I don't know why he held those two positions until he was called out on it. But apparently, this is very disturbing to some people out there that we are trying to hold Dave Rubin to account. Here is Joe Rogan and Eric Weinstein, who is a member of, considered one of the
charter member.
Intellectual dark web.
I believe that there are sophisticated players who are engaged in trying to either boost our signal or start to alter the signal. Somebody will be up, somebody will be down. And then there's really weird dynamics. I think that there's a very strange thing going on, not with Dave Rubin, but with the crowd of people that is just trying to eat Dave Rubin and blind him and confuse him. And there's this guy, Sam Seder, who...
Do you think he's a Russian?
I hope he is. Well, I don't know. I don't think he's Russian, but I do think that I think he has a grassroots following. I don't think this is inauthentic. That just loves to harass. Well, dunk, drag. I hate this language. I just
like
can't.
dunking. I like the word dunking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fun.
No, I'm not a fan.
No,
because it cheapens all conversation. Oh, you got dunked on. You got dragged. It's just like, oh, this is that thing in third grade that I never figured out.
Well, they found out that he won't engage with them, and so they think it's cute to just constantly shit on him, and they also think it's cute to take anything that he says and interpret it in the worst possible way possible.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, understand, it's not cute. It's not. I don't do this for cuteness. It'll be very explicit as to why I think it's important that we do this, and that is because when the New York Times goes and gives Dave Rubin and, frankly, all of the members of the IDW some type of legitimacy, when reporters go in and uncritically report or do features on Dave Rubin, I think when we started this project, there was a lot of that. It further promotes the dissemination of this type of misinformation, right-wing propaganda, and also the whole premise of the IDW, it seems to me, which is in some way like just clouded by the notion that this is that it's intellectual and that it's dark web. Both those things are not true. The dark web thing is obviously ridiculous. These are people who are on literally the biggest platforms that exist online. These are people who have been featured in magazines, in the biggest newspapers in the country. These are people who have more access to the web and to everything else, to the light, than anything. And then the fact that this is an intellectual pursuit is also ridiculous. There is no soundness. I mean, this Eric Weinstein is obviously a very smart guy, but Joe Rogan is about to explain to us right now that the guy who has been the conduit for so much of it, apparently, according to him, is not. I don't care if Dave Rubin is dumb or smart. It doesn't matter to me. It's irrelevant. But when whatever comes out of his mouth hits our body politic, it's bad. And I want to stop that. And I want to stop that insofar as, I don't want to stop him actually talking about it. I want to make sure that the way that it's received by people and the way that it's mediated to people, in the same way Dave Rubin has, Stefan Molyneux, and says, we're both centrists. He is mediating and midwifing Stefan Molyneux and mainstreaming him. And in the same way that he does that unencumbered, I don't want that to happen with Dave Rubin's BS. And so we're trying to intervene to the extent that we can. But here's Joe Rogan making, I guess, what is some type of an excuse for Dave Rubin.
And not think of it as him just being a guy who's trying to talk about things on the fly.
Right.
And maybe isn't even prepared about the subject at hand. Like one of the things that comes up on this show, like, you know, we were talking before we were going to go on there, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, come on, let's just talk.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, come on, let's just talk thing,
yeah,
you never know what the fuck is going to come up. And you might have a piss poorly formed idea of what a subject is, and you just start rambling.
Yeah, well, that's what I've done in my two previous
no, you have not, but it seems,
Pause it. So we do about 3 hours every day on this show. Maybe 2.5, really, is more accurate. And yes, I will cop to reading and preparing for what the day's news is. And if I'm interviewing somebody, I will read their work, and I will read about their work, and I will read interviews that they've done. And when we come in, I look at, I have very extensive notes about what we're going to do today.
Don't be ableist.
But to say I can get on a platform that has 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million subscribers to do things that I know that 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 or 500,000 or 1 million people are going to watch, and say, like, I wasn't prepared and I just was like bullshitting. That's not a defense.
He said he wanted to talk about calipers and people's brain sizes. Okay, I didn't read that. I was doing demographic comedy.
That's not a defense. That's not a defense. If you invite a guest onto your program, if it happens once, maybe, that you don't have a clue as to what they're going to talk about, but you know you're having them on because there's a lot of attention around them. You should find out what that attention's about.
Yeah, it's not like Dave Rubin talks to these people about like their ayahuasca trips or like
wrestling. I mean, that is one of the reasons
know
that
what
Joe's shows
about.
Is different. But here's the thing. I would say what Joe's doing for Dave and what they're all doing collectively right now was encapsulated in a phrase from a different time, the time that means a lot to Sam, which is the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Well, indeed.
I have higher expectations for people with these platforms.
Well,
you can do a little guest prep
of my authors.
Yeah,
you do a little guest prep. Dave.
It's irresponsible.
Dave's
it's incredibly irresponsible. Now, I don't know if it's fair to take Rogan's word for it that Dave Rubin just doesn't know what's going on half the time. But if that's certainly not a defense. But let's hear. There's more speculation as to what we're doing.
Idea of what a subject is, and you just start rambling.
Yeah, well, that's what I've done in my 2 previous
Well, no,
appearances.
you have not, but it seems, it's easy to think that you did that. But with Dave, there's enough moments where he's misstepped where they just feel like, okay, we got a wounded antelope.
Yeah. They're trying to pick him off. And, I think there was probably a move to do Shapiro, and there was a period where you were seemingly in the crosshairs, but you're hard to kill. And, I have no doubt that
I was in the crosshairs? I wasn't even noticing. See, that's the benefit of not paying attention. And this is something that I've been pretty rigorous about over the last 6 months, a year or so.
You, Sam Harris, and Dave Rubin have all given me versions of this advice. And I worry about it because I'm not large enough yet that I've been the target of a steady campaign. But what happens is you see people's feedback loops interrupted.
I mean, it's not a feedback loop that's being interrupted. It's the feedback loop. Yeah, exactly. That's what the feedback is. See, I mean, this is the thing is that for the IDW, the idea of people coming back with criticism that has already been acknowledged as grassroots, that is an interruption of a feedback loop. But no, that is a feedback loop. There are people out there, a lot of people, who don't like what you're saying. And they're not preventing you from saying it.
Exactly.
You're just going to try and somehow maybe A, make it not so lucrative, or B, make the criticism as prominent as the message.
Just be clear as exactly, and which is frankly exactly, I mean, it goes without saying, but it needs to be said. This is exactly how you've built your whole brand.
Exactly.
Which is making a giant melodrama about people who are often facing infinitely more serious circumstances than getting dunked on Twitter. I'm sorry, Brett, I know you don't like that word. I mean, it's the melodrama is ridiculous. Even just the notion of using the word kill in this context as part of like the idea of literally just having robust criticism campaigns on social media. I would never in a million years say that Dave Rubin should be removed from any platform. I would never even say that a college campus should cancel him if he wants to get paid by TPUSA to travel across the country and not be able to answer college students' questions and get money for it. And he wants to do, a million right-wing, classical liberal podcasts. That's cool. But we're going to say exactly who he is and what he's doing. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with, in fact, the core tenet of the Enlightenment and open intellectual culture. That's literally what it is.
Yes, there are people who just don't like to be criticized, and they do not have the and look, we're not talking about some dude who's like a barista at a Starbucks, right? We're not talking about some guy who's an insurance agent somewhere. This is someone who is trying to make themselves a public figure or is a public figure. And it's not even just someone who's like, I'm just the host of Price is Right. Why are you coming after me about, this is someone who's literally got a show that is to promote political ideas. And the idea that somehow this should be above reproach, or that people shouldn't use, humorous critique as a methodology in which to garner attention, because the idea that this message is going to go uncontested, sorry, not going to do it. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
And neither is our message. I mean, it's just incredible. Like, what are you talking about? The whole point of the origin of the brand of this freakout was, in fact, saying that people are snowflakes. People can't have their ideas interrogated. Cool. Let's interrogate ideas. I'm down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're doing.
You see people's feedback loops interrupted.
Yeah, nobody
and
likes
I will
their
remind
feedback
people,
loops interrupted.
The
That's
reason
true.
why Dave Rubin will not engage is supposedly, because I can't read his mind, supposedly because of a video that Michael did that we entitled Dave Rubin is Stupid. When I was aware of that video and that Dave was upset about it, we pulled the video down and I publicly apologized to him. And still, that's a problem. But I will also remind you that on two separate occasions, one with Jarsh Harkin, I think from In These Times, maybe it was, or Mother Jones, and one with the New York Times reporter who wrote the recent thing about the radicalization of Rus, right? Rubin claimed that these people libeled him. Libeled him. Legal term. And then he invited them on. So he will not invite me on because we called him stupid and then apologized for it and took the video down. But he will invite people on who have supposedly, in his mind, libeled him. That doesn't seem to make any sense. So that's that.
Well, it's not just that. Next time, Brett, mention my own show and book, motherfucker.
I have to say that my brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
That drop is never not.
Also, Ben Shapiro's still a antelope.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Ben Shapiro's not
if he was actually an antelope, the other antelopes would try to set him up to get picked off. They'd be like, can we get this guy out of here?
So lastly, Justin Amash has left the Republican Party. And the question is he hoping to siphon votes off of, and from whom, in the presidential election? He is not a member of the Republican Party. Maybe he will run as for the Libertarian Party. I don't know. It's unclear to me who he would take votes from at this point, to be honest with you. But here he is with Jake Tapper, the only Republican to come out at the time in favor of impeachment, claims that behind closed doors, Republicans are actually good people.
What about the possibility of your running for president as a libertarian or under some other ticket? I asked you about that 4 or 5 months ago, and you didn't rule it out. Is it possible you would run for president?
I still wouldn't rule anything like that out. I believe that I have to use my skills, my public influence where it serves the country best. And I believe I have to defend the Constitution in whichever way works best. And if that means doing something else, then I do that. But I feel confident about running in my district. I feel a close tie to my community. I care a lot about my community. I want to represent them in Congress.
When do you think you'll make a decision about a possible presidential run?
Well, it's something people talk about all the time. It's not something that's right on my radar right now, so I couldn't tell you.
I mean, I suspect that he's probably going to look at the polling and see if he would take votes away from Trump or he would take votes away from the Democratic nominee.
Is there some procedural thing that he can't run as a Republican?
Well, if he's just resigned from the party,
right.
I imagine he couldn't.
But I'm saying it would have been. I mean, just thinking through it myself, like just challenge Trump as a Republican, not do this independent.
That would
nonsense.
be way more.
Well, then you're only in the primary, and not in the general. So, all right, folks. I'm sorry, we're not going to have more time for calls. We're already 10 minutes in. We will be back tomorrow, and. Well, let me read 5 more IMs. Militant apathy. Back in 2009, I had gone from city cop to federal agent, was in EVO training with 3 Hispanic ICE agent trainees. The instructor teaching EVO, I don't know what that is, evasive, I don't know, was a legacy Border Patrol guy pre-ICE. While we were taking a break for them to get the vehicles ready, the instructor started talking to the new ICE agents about his time in the Border Patrol. He referred to the immigrants as wets. It took me a while to figure out what was short for wetbacks. Once I figured out, I was salty as F because I knew if anybody worked with called a civilian an N-word, I would have handed their asses right at them. But they didn't say a word, just kept it moving, laughing at this dude. So after training, I pulled the ICE guys aside and I was like, what the fuck is up with this guy calling people wets? And they were like, F it, that's what they are. That shit blew my mind. That's the culture.
Emergency vehicle operations.
Inner bangs. Is MM true or not? It appears to be true based on military spending, so I even talk about raising taxes on the middle class. Isn't it time to be honest with the people? For example, the individual mandate was simply pay-go bollocks. We may not be able to tax billionaires as much as we want, but we need to gain power and stability for the working class. We need to learn MMT. Tax the billionaires. Well, first off, I think MMT is an accurate theory. I don't know if you want to expend political capital on trying to sell that in the context of an election. I think over time, you do that. The mandate, I don't think was pay-go. I think it was basically saying we need everybody in the risk pool to lower costs. It wasn't money necessarily paid out by the government. It's to lower costs for everybody within the insurance pools. Gregor, hey Sam, need to change a handle on a hammer. Is a wood file the best tool for getting the fit right? Yeah, or sandpaper. I mean, it depends. Savlasco, is there a difference between private insurance versus private healthcare in terms of abolishing one of them? Can you still pay a doctor instead of a middleman? Yeah, you're not getting rid of private healthcare. You're getting rid of the insurance that covers the healthcare. That's all. And Bonara, am I using exchange-based coverage and still, I never really know if they're going to screw me out of coverage when I need it. With Medicare and Medicaid type plan, apart from the tax versus premiums discussion, I feel like I wouldn't be in terror of being screwed if I needed serious coverage. Indeed. And the final IM of the day, Beto. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, Sam, but can I count on your support in the primary? I think we have a really good shot at winning. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,